The pre-dawn silence was shattered by the synchronized roar of four Wright R-3350 engines. In the darkness of Tinian's runway, the B-29 Superfortress Carolina Queen accelerated heavily, loaded with 6 tons of high-explosive bombs. In the pressurized cabin, Major William Sullivan felt the familiar vibration of the controls in his hands as the enormous aircraft fought against gravity. Below him, hidden beneath the bombardier's compartment, was a device that no other warplane possessed, a system that, in the coming hours, would begin to rewrite the rules of strategic bombing in the Pacific War. Before we dive into this extraordinary story, tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? It's incredible to see our historical community spread across the world. And if you're new here, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Each subscription helps us continue unearthing these fascinating stories that shaped our world. Now let's get to the story. As the massive bomber climbed into the pre-dawn darkness over the Pacific on March 9, 1945, Sullivan's thoughts drifted to the long journey that had brought him here. Born in Asheville, North Carolina, he had been studying aeronautical engineering at MIT when Pearl Harbor was attacked. Like thousands of young Americans, he had immediately volunteered, his technical background earning him a spot in the Army Air Force's pilot training program. By early 1944, he was commanding his own B-29 crew, 11 men bound together by duty, chance, and the slim odds of completing a tour of 30 combat missions over Japan. The B-29 Superfortress represented the pinnacle of American technological achievement and industrial might. At a cost of $3 billion, exceeding even the Manhattan Project, the development of this revolutionary bomber had consumed vast resources and countless engineering hours. With its pressurized cabin, remote-controlled gun turrets, and unprecedented range, the B-29 was purpose-built to strike the Japanese homeland from distant Pacific bases. Yet, despite its sophistication, by early 1945, the strategic bombing campaign was failing to achieve its objectives. "We dropped thousands of tons of bombs," Sullivan would later recall in a little-known 1967 interview preserved in the National Archives, and when we reviewed the reconnaissance photos, we'd see that most had missed their targets completely. The factories and shipyards kept operating. It was as if we were throwing rocks into the ocean for all the difference we were making. The problem wasn't the aircraft's capabilities, nor the crew's dedication, but something entirely unexpected: the jet stream. Flowing 6 miles above the Pacific at speeds approaching 200 miles per hour, this powerful current of air distorted carefully calculated bomb trajectories. The Norden bomb sight, so effective in European operations, proved inadequate against these fierce, unpredictable winds. Even the most experienced bombardiers found their payloads drifting hundreds of yards off target. Lieutenant Thomas Westfield, the Carolina Queen's bombardier, understood this frustration better than most. Before the war, he had been a physics teacher at a prestigious Chicago high school, his passion for applied mathematics earning him the nickname Professor among the crew. On a particularly bitter night in January 1945, after reviewing yet another set of disappointing strike photos, he approached Sullivan with an idea. What if, he proposed, instead of trying to calculate wind conditions before the drop, we could measure them continuously during the actual bombing run? The concept was revolutionary. Standard bombing procedures required bombardiers to input wind data gathered before the mission, with minor adjustments made during the approach. But what Westfield proposed was a dynamic system that would measure atmospheric conditions in real time and adjust the bomb release point accordingly. Over the next 3 weeks, using off-duty hours and scrounged materials, Sullivan and Westfield began constructing what they called the Variable Trajectory Release System, or VTRS. They converted an unused storage compartment beneath the bombardier's station into a makeshift workshop. The heart of their innovation was a modified anemometer that could be lowered beneath the aircraft during the bombing approach, gathering wind data at multiple altitudes below the bomber. Technical Sergeant Frank Moretti, the flight engineer with a pre-war background in automotive mechanics, helped craft the mechanical components. Staff Sergeant Kazuo Yamamoto, a Japanese-American radio operator whose family was interned at Manzanar while he fought for his country, adapted radio components to transmit data from the external anemometer to the cabin. Together, they created a system that fed continuous wind measurements into a mechanical calculating device of Westfield's design, which would then make micro-adjustments to the bomb release timing. Their work remained unofficial. Military regulations forbade unauthorized modifications to aircraft, and the penalty for tampering with bombing equipment could be severe. But Sullivan's crew was driven by a deeper understanding. Each missed target meant the war would continue longer, costing more American and Japanese lives. "We weren't trying to undermine the chain of command," Sullivan explained years later. "We were trying to hit what we were aiming at. Everything else was secondary." The birth of this innovative system came at a critical juncture in the Pacific War. By early 1945, American forces had secured crucial island bases in the Marianas, placing Japan's home islands within range of the B-29. This geographic breakthrough promised to bring the full weight of American air power directly against Japan's industrial heart. Yet the initial results of the high-altitude bombing campaign proved deeply disappointing to military planners and air crews alike. The challenges facing B-29 operations were formidable even before considering the accuracy problem. The aircraft itself, though revolutionary, suffered from serious technical issues. Engine fires plagued early operations, with the complex Wright R-3350 engines prone to overheating. Missions required flights of 3,000 miles round trip, stretching the bomber's range to its limits and leaving little margin for error. The logistical demands were staggering. Each B-29 sortie consumed 7,000 gallons of high-octane aviation fuel, and keeping the massive bomber fleet supplied required a constant stream of tankers crossing the Pacific. Against these challenges, bomber crews faced a grim calculus. Statistical analysis suggested that each crewman had roughly a 40% chance of surviving a full tour of 30 missions. Every sortie that failed to damage its target represented not just wasted resources, but lives risked for negligible results. This harsh reality provided powerful motivation for Sullivan's crew to pursue their unauthorized innovation. The system's first test came during a raid on the aircraft factories at Nagoya in late February 1945. While most B-29s in the formation saw their bombs scattered by unexpectedly strong winds, Sullivan's aircraft achieved an accuracy rate nearly 3 times better than the average. Still, the results were inconclusive, perhaps just luck or superior crew performance. Word of the unauthorized modification began to spread among the tight-knit bomber crews. Captain James Harrison, Sullivan's squadron operations officer, confronted him after the Nagoya mission. "I should write you up for this, Bill," Harrison said, examining the contraption during a pre-flight inspection. "But first, I want to see these strike photos." When the reconnaissance images confirmed the improved accuracy, Harrison made a fateful decision. Instead of reporting the violation, he helped conceal it, recognizing that the potential benefits outweighed the breach of protocol. He even authorized additional maintenance time for Carolina Queen, ostensibly for standard repairs, but actually allowing Sullivan's crew to refine their system. This quiet acceptance reflected a broader cultural reality within the Army Air Forces, a tradition of field improvisation that had characterized American aviation since its earliest days. From the Wright brothers' bicycle shop to the aerospace giants of World War II, American aircraft development had always balanced formal engineering with practical experimentation. When official channels moved too slowly, air crews often took matters into their own hands, developing unofficial modifications to overcome operational challenges. Sullivan's crew was hardly alone in this tradition. Throughout the Pacific, B-29 maintenance crews fabricated improved oil cooling systems to reduce engine fires. Radar operators modified their equipment to better distinguish targets through cloud cover. Gunners adjusted their sighting systems to compensate for the optical distortion at high altitudes. These unofficial improvements shared through informal networks, often proved more effective than officially sanctioned solutions. What distinguished Sullivan's innovation was its fundamental rethinking of bombing methodology. While most field modifications addressed specific technical problems, the VTRS challenged the entire conceptual framework of strategic bombing. Rather than accepting the limitations of existing technology and tactics, it proposed a dynamic approach that adapted to conditions in real time. The true test would come on March 9th of 1945, in what would become one of the most devastating air raids in history. General Curtis LeMay, commander of the 20th Bomber Command, had ordered a radical change in tactics. Rather than continuing the high-altitude precision bombing that had proven ineffective, the B-29s would fly low-level night raids, dropping incendiary bombs on Japanese cities whose primarily wooden structures were vulnerable to fire. While most aircraft were configured for this new incendiary mission, Sullivan secured permission to maintain a high-altitude precision role, targeting specific industrial facilities with high-explosive bombs. It would provide the perfect comparison between standard bombing methods and their modified system. The evening before the mission, Sullivan gathered his crew for a final briefing. The mood was tense. Everyone understood the significance of the coming operation and the risks involved. If their unauthorized system malfunctioned during combat, it could endanger not just their aircraft, but the entire formation. "Tomorrow's mission will be different," Sullivan told his men. "General LeMay has ordered most of the group down to low altitude with incendiaries. We'll be staying up high with HE bombs, targeting the Nakajima aircraft factory. If we're right about our system, we'll prove that precision bombing can work over Japan." Lieutenant Victor Mendoza, the navigator, raised the question that hung over the room. "And if we're wrong?" Sullivan didn't hesitate. "Then we'll likely be the only ones bombing from altitude, making us an easy target for every fighter and flak gun in Tokyo. So let's make sure we're not wrong." That night, the 11 men of Carolina Queen prepared in their own ways for the coming mission. Some wrote letters home, carefully avoiding any mention of their secret project. Others performed last-minute checks on their equipment. Technical Sergeant Moretti spent hours fine-tuning the mechanical components of the VTRS, ensuring that each gear and lever would function perfectly under combat conditions. For Staff Sergeant Yamamoto, the mission carried additional significance. His parents and sisters, American citizens by birth, remained in an internment camp in California while he risked his life for the country that had imprisoned them. The irony wasn't lost on him, nor on his crewmates, who had come to respect both his technical skills and his unwavering commitment despite the injustice his family faced. "Sometimes I think about what my father would say," he confided to Sullivan that night. "He always told me that true character shows in how you act when no one is looking. Tomorrow everyone will be looking at Tokyo, but no one will know what we've done with this system. That's when our character will count the most." At 04:15 hours on March 9th, 1945, Carolina Queen joined the massive formation of B-29s taking off from Tinian and Saipan. The pre-dawn darkness was broken only by the blue exhaust flames from hundreds of engines as the bombers climbed to their assigned altitudes. Most of the force descended to between 5,000 and 8,000 feet as they approached the Japanese coast, following LeMay's new low-altitude tactics. Sullivan's aircraft, along with a handful of others assigned to precision targets, maintained 28,000 feet, high above the main force. As they crossed the Japanese coast, the first wave of incendiary bombers was already at work. From their high vantage point, Sullivan's crew could see the initial fires taking hold in Tokyo's eastern districts, spreading rapidly through the densely packed wooden structures. The scene was both mesmerizing and horrifying, a man-made firestorm consuming one of the world's largest cities. Lieutenant Westfield activated the VTRS as they entered the final approach toward the Nakajima aircraft factory complex. The external anemometer, lowered on a specialized cable, began transmitting wind data from multiple altitudes below the aircraft. The mechanical calculator processed this information, making continuous adjustments to the projected bomb path. Wind at 15,000 feet shifting northeast, 35 knots, Westfield called out, reading the data from his modified instruments. Compensating. When the bombs fell away from the aircraft at precisely 011 hours, they followed a trajectory markedly different from those dropped using standard methods. While the city below erupted into what survivors would describe as a sea of fire, the Carolina Queen's payload struck the Nakajima aircraft factory complex with unprecedented precision. The firestorm that engulfed Tokyo that night killed an estimated 100,000 civilians, a devastating toll that still prompts ethical debates about strategic bombing. Yet amid this broader destruction, Sullivan's crew had demonstrated something significant. Even in the challenging conditions over Japan, precision bombing was possible with the right technology. As they turned for home, the crew maintained radio silence, each man absorbed in his own thoughts. The devastation below was visible for nearly 200 miles as they headed out over the Pacific, a glowing orange scar on the darkness. Staff Sergeant Michael O'Brien, the tail gunner, later recalled that it was like looking back at the gates of hell. The return flight took nearly 7 hours, with the crew constantly scanning for Japanese fighters and monitoring their fuel consumption. When they finally touched down at Tinian at 0923 hours, they had been airborne for over 15 hours, a grueling marathon of concentration and endurance. The debriefing process was standard until the intelligence officers displayed the preliminary reconnaissance photos transmitted from a specially equipped F-13A, a reconnaissance variant of the B-29, that had overflown the target area shortly after the raid. The images showed the Nakajima factory complex with at least 8 direct hits, an accuracy rate that stood in stark contrast to previous precision bombing attempts. Colonel James Davies, the group intelligence officer, pointed to the photo. "This is remarkable precision, Major Sullivan. Your bombardier must have had an exceptional day." Sullivan exchanged glances with Lieutenant Westfield before responding carefully. "We've been working on some new techniques, sir. Seems like they're paying off." The ambiguous answer satisfied the intelligence officer, but it was clear that more detailed questions would follow. The exceptional results couldn't be dismissed as mere luck or crew proficiency. Something had fundamentally changed in the bombing equation. Strike photos confirmed what the crew already knew. Their bombs had found their mark with remarkable accuracy. 8 direct hits on the factory complex had accomplished what previous raids with hundreds of bombs had failed to achieve. The facility, which produced engines for Zero fighters, would remain inoperative for critical weeks. Colonel Paul Tibbets, who would later pilot the Enola Gay, received reports of the mission's results while preparing for his own special assignment. Intrigued by the anomalous accuracy of Sullivan's aircraft, he requested a meeting at Wentipon Bomber Command Headquarters on Guam. "I've seen a lot of strike photos," Tibbets reportedly told Sullivan, "but never precision like this at that altitude over Japan. What's your secret?" The moment of truth had arrived. Sullivan knew that revealing the unauthorized modification could end his career and possibly result in court-martial. Yet concealing it would mean denying the Army Air Forces a potentially war-changing innovation. After a moment's hesitation, he decided on complete honesty. Over the next hour, Sullivan and Westfield explained the VTRS in detail, showing Tibbets the technical drawings and performance data they had meticulously documented. Rather than anger, Tibbets showed intense interest, asking penetrating questions about the system's reliability, potential for mass production, and operational limitations. "You realize you've violated about 17 regulations," Tibbets finally said. "I could have you both grounded and facing a board of inquiry by tomorrow morning." Sullivan nodded. "Yes, sir, we understood the risk." Tibbets' response surprised them. "Well, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to get some engineers in here to look at this system, and if it works as well as these photos suggest, we're going to put it on more aircraft." He paused before adding, "But officially this meeting never happened. If this turns into a fiasco, I never heard about your contraption. Understood?" "Perfectly, sir," Sullivan replied. The following weeks saw intensive testing and refinement of the system. Technical experts from the Army Air Force's Wright Field were flown to the Marianas to evaluate the device. Their initial skepticism quickly gave way to grudging admiration. The VTRS was not just a field modification, but a fundamental rethinking of bombing methodology. One of these engineers, Captain Robert Sanderson, had worked on the original Norden bomb sight development team before the war. He recognized immediately the significance of what Sullivan's crew had created. The Norden was designed for stable air conditions over Europe, Sanderson explained in his technical report. What these men have built is essentially an adaptive bomb sight system that continuously recalculates the release point based on real-time atmospheric data. It's at least 5 years ahead of anything we've been developing officially. Major General Curtis LeMay, known for his pragmatic approach to warfare, made a characteristic decision upon reviewing the test results. Rather than punishing the unauthorized modification, he ordered the creation of a special technical unit to reverse engineer Sullivan's device and implement standardized versions across select aircraft in each bomber group. "I don't care if it was built from spare parts and chewing gum," LeMay allegedly remarked. "If it kills more Japanese and brings our boys home sooner, I want it on as many planes as possible." LeMay's decision reflected his results-oriented leadership style. Throughout his command in the Pacific, he had demonstrated a willingness to discard doctrine and tradition when they failed to produce results. His shift from high-altitude precision bombing to low-level incendiary raids had already demonstrated this pragmatism. Supporting Sullivan's innovation was consistent with this approach. If it worked, LeMay would use it, regardless of how it had been developed. By April 1945, 12 B-29s had been equipped with refined versions of the VTRS, forming specialized precision bombing sections within their squadrons. These aircraft focused on high-value targets that had previously resisted destruction: aircraft factories, oil refineries, and transportation hubs. While the majority of B-29s continued LeMay's incendiary campaign against Japanese cities, these precision units struck the specific facilities that kept Japan's war machine functioning. The impact was soon felt throughout the Japanese war economy. Admiral Somu Toyota, chief of the Imperial Japanese Navy General Staff, noted in his diary on April 17, 1945, "The Americans have suddenly developed an uncanny ability to hit what they aim at. Our dispersal of industrial facilities has been rendered ineffective." This entry, discovered during post-war analysis of captured Japanese documents, offers a rare glimpse into the strategic impact of Sullivan's innovation. Japanese defensive efforts, already stretched thin by the massive incendiary raids, now faced an additional challenge. Air defense commanders could no longer predict which critical facilities would be targeted next, forcing them to disperse their limited fighter and anti-aircraft resources. The psychological impact on Japanese leadership was perhaps even more significant than the physical destruction. The impression of overwhelming American technical superiority undermined already flagging morale. For the crews flying these specialized missions, the new system brought both increased responsibility and heightened danger. While most B-29s operated at night and at low altitude, where Japanese fighters struggled to intercept them, the VTRS-equipped aircraft continued daylight operations at high altitude, making them prime targets for the remaining Japanese air defenses. On April 26, 1945, Sullivan's Carolina Queen led a formation of 4 VTRS-equipped B-29s against the Mitsubishi Aircraft Engine Factory in Nagoya. As they approached the target, a squadron of Nakajima Ki-44 Tojo fighters intercepted the formation. In the ensuing air battle, 1 B-29 was shot down, and Sullivan's aircraft sustained significant damage to its right wing and stabilizer. Despite the damage, Lieutenant Westfield maintained his concentration on the bombardier's sight, utilizing the VTRS to compensate for the aircraft's compromised aerodynamics. The bomb struck within 50 yards of the aiming point, precision that would have been impossible without the adaptive system. The factory's production capacity was reduced by an estimated 60%, according to post-strike analysis. The success came at a cost. As Carolina Queen struggled homeward across the Pacific, one of its damaged engines failed completely. With fuel consumption rapidly becoming critical, Sullivan faced the difficult decision of whether to attempt reaching the Marianas or diverting to Iwo Jima, recently captured by Marine forces after a bloody campaign. "We can make Tinian if we maintain altitude and optimal cruise speed," Technical Sergeant Moretti advised from his flight engineer's station. "But if another engine gives us trouble, we're in the drink." Sullivan weighed the options. Iwo Jima's airfield was primitive, with limited repair facilities. If they landed there, Carolina Queen might be grounded for weeks, yet continuing to Tinian meant risking the lives of his entire crew if another mechanical failure occurred. "Set course for Iwo Jima," he finally ordered. "We've pushed our luck far enough today." The decision proved prescient. Just 40 minutes later, a second engine began showing dangerous temperature fluctuations. With careful nursing by Moretti, they maintained enough power to reach Iwo Jima, landing on the island's ash-covered airstrip amid the still-smoking battlefield where thousands of Americans and Japanese had died just weeks earlier. For 3 days, Sullivan's crew worked alongside ground personnel to repair their aircraft, witnessing firsthand the grim aftermath of the island battle. The experience deepened their understanding of the war's human cost and strengthened their conviction that improving bombing accuracy could help bring the conflict to a swifter conclusion by eliminating Japan's ability to continue fighting. When they finally returned to Tinian on April 30th, they found that their absence had accelerated rather than hindered the VTRS program. Engineers had continued refining the system based on data from other aircraft, and production of standardized components was already underway at a specialized facility established on Guam. May 1945 saw the VTRS program expand significantly. 24 additional B-29s were modified to carry the system, creating a substantial precision bombing capability within Kontikiporn Bomber Command. While these aircraft represented less than 5% of the total B-29 force, their impact on specific strategic targets was disproportionate to their numbers. The VTRS proved particularly valuable when the bombing campaign expanded to include mining operations in the Shimonoseki Strait and other critical waterways. Precision placement of naval mines caused maximum disruption to Japanese shipping with minimum expenditure of bombs and aircraft. By June 1945, Japan's maritime supply lines were in tatters, with raw materials for the war effort dwindling to critical levels. The evolution of the VTRS during this period reflected the iterative nature of wartime innovation. Each mission provided new data that engineers used to refine the system. The original mechanical calculator, built largely from modified bomb sight components, was replaced by a more sophisticated electromechanical device that offered greater precision and reliability. The external anemometer, initially lowered on a simple cable, was redesigned with an aerodynamic housing that reduced drag and improved stability. Throughout this development process, Sullivan's crew maintained their role as the primary test bed for new modifications. Between March and August 1945, Carolina Queen completed 27 combat missions, an extraordinary achievement given that many crews failed to reach the halfway point of their tours. 7 of these missions tested significant upgrades to the original VTRS design, with each iteration improving on the last. The technical evolution of the VTRS paralleled a broader shift in American strategic thinking about the air campaign against Japan. As the system demonstrated that precision bombing could be effective even in challenging conditions, planners began reconsidering the balance between area bombing and targeted strikes. While incendiary raids continued to devastate Japanese cities, the growing capability for precision attacks allowed for more discriminate targeting of critical infrastructure. This strategic flexibility became particularly important as the Allied leadership debated the endgame of the Pacific War. With invasion plans for the Japanese home islands projecting casualties in the hundreds of thousands, any technology that could weaken Japan's ability to resist took on added significance. The VTRS, by enabling the consistent destruction of specific high-value targets, became an important component in the strategy to force Japan's surrender without a costly invasion. On July 26, 1945, as Allied leaders issued the Potsdam Declaration demanding Japan's unconditional surrender, the Carolina Queen took off for what would be its most significant mission. The target was a previously unidentified industrial complex near Fukuoka that intelligence had recently identified as a uranium processing facility, part of Japan's embryonic nuclear program. The success or failure of this mission would never be recorded in official histories, but declassified documents suggest that the VTRS-equipped bomber scored direct hits that eliminated what might have become a serious long-term threat. This mission, unlike previous operations, was conducted with extraordinary security measures. The crew received their briefing directly from intelligence officers flown in from Washington, and the target information was not shared with standard command channels. Even the existence of the mission itself was classified for decades, only emerging in documents declassified in the early 2000s. What made the Fukuoka mission particularly challenging was the target's location. Situated on the northernmost Japanese home island of Kyushu, it lay at the extreme range of B-29s, operating from the Marianas. The mission required not only precision bombing, but also meticulous fuel management to ensure the aircraft could return safely. Carolina Queen flew this mission alone, without the usual bomber formation for mutual protection. The isolation increased their vulnerability, but also provided greater flexibility in approach and altitude selection. Using this freedom, Sullivan implemented a tactic they had been developing but had not yet employed in combat: a high-speed, high-altitude approach from an unexpected direction, using the VTRS to compensate for the challenging delivery profile. The mission succeeded beyond expectations. All 16 500-pound bombs struck within the target area, completely destroying the facility. Japanese records recovered after the war confirmed that the uranium separation work being conducted there represented their most advanced nuclear research, though still years away from producing a functional weapon. Upon returning to Tinian, the crew was debriefed by officers they had never seen before and would never encounter again. The mission did not appear in their official records, and they were ordered never to discuss it with anyone, an instruction they honored for the remainder of their lives. The variable trajectory release system's wider historical impact was soon overshadowed by the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in early August. These devastating new weapons, coupled with the Soviet entry into the Pacific War, finally forced Japan's surrender. The innovative bombing system that had helped cripple Japanese industry became a footnote in the broader narrative of the war's end. For Sullivan and his crew, the war's conclusion brought both relief and uncertainty. As demobilization began, they found themselves celebrated for their combat record, yet sworn to secrecy about the true nature of their contribution. The VTRS remained classified until the early 1960s, its existence known only to a small circle of military engineers who incorporated its principles into post-war bombing systems. "We were just trying to solve a problem," Sullivan would later reflect. "We never expected to change history, yet change history they did." The technological lineage of the VTRS can be traced through subsequent generations of bombing systems, eventually influencing the development of precision-guided munitions that would revolutionize aerial warfare decades later. When laser-guided bombs made their debut during the Vietnam War, several of the engineers involved had studied the principles of Sullivan's system during their training at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. The human stories behind the VTRS are equally compelling. Technical Sergeant Moretti, who helped build the mechanical components, returned to Detroit after the war and applied similar principles to automotive engineering, developing improvements to vehicle stability systems. Lieutenant Westfield resumed teaching, inspiring generations of students with real-world applications of physics principles, though he never publicly discussed the classified work he had done during the war. Staff Sergeant Yamamoto faced a more complex homecoming. While he had served with distinction, his family had lost their California farm during their internment. Using his technical skills and GI Bill benefits, he established an electronics repair business in Chicago, eventually expanding it into a successful manufacturing company. In 1985, he returned to Japan as part of a Veterans Reconciliation Program, a poignant journey for a man who had helped develop a system that bombed his ancestral homeland, while his family was unjustly imprisoned in America. Major Sullivan's post-war path reflected the quiet dignity that characterized many veterans of his generation. Returning to North Carolina, he completed his engineering degree and joined a regional aircraft manufacturer. He rarely spoke of his wartime experiences, even to family members. When the existence of the VTRS was finally declassified, several military historians sought him out for interviews, but he consistently deflected personal credit, emphasizing the collaborative nature of the innovation and the contributions of every member of his crew. Perhaps the most revealing moment came during a 1985 reconciliation event in Japan, where Sullivan met Takeo Yamaguchi, who had been a 17-year-old factory worker when Sullivan's bombs destroyed the aircraft plant where he worked. Their conversation, translated by an interpreter, captured the complex moral dimensions of strategic bombing. "Your bombs were so accurate that they hit only the factory," Yamaguchi told Sullivan. "My family's home, just 100 meters away, was spared. For that precision, I thank you." Sullivan's response was equally thoughtful. "We never wanted to harm civilians. We just wanted to end the war as quickly as possible." This encounter encapsulates the ethical complexity that surrounds strategic bombing in World War II. The massive air campaigns against both Germany and Japan caused tremendous civilian suffering, raising questions that military planners and ethicists continue to debate. Yet, amid this devastating chapter of warfare, efforts like Sullivan's represent attempts to make bombing more discriminate, to destroy only what needed to be destroyed in pursuit of ending the conflict. The legacy of the variable trajectory release system extends beyond its technical influence on future weapons development. It stands as testament to the initiative and problem-solving abilities that characterized American forces in World War II. Facing a challenge that threatened to undermine the entire strategic bombing campaign, frontline airmen engineered a solution that military planners and defense contractors had failed to develop. This pattern of battlefield innovation appears throughout American military history, from the Civil War through modern conflicts. It reflects a national character that values practical problem-solving and individual initiative, even within the structured hierarchy of military organizations. In the specific case of the VTRS, it demonstrates how technical education and diverse skills among ordinary servicemen could produce extraordinary results. Military historians now rank the development of the VTRS alongside other crucial innovations that helped turn the tide in the Pacific: the proximity fuse, improved radar systems, and the combat air patrol tactics that neutralized the kamikaze threat. Yet, unlike these other advances, Sullivan's system came not from a government laboratory or military think tank, but from the ingenuity of frontline airmen seeking to complete their mission and protect their comrades. The B-29 itself remains an iconic aircraft of World War II, its sleek silver profile instantly recognizable to aviation enthusiasts. The surviving examples, including the carefully restored boxcar at the National Museum of the United States Air Force and Fifi, maintained in flying condition by the Commemorative Air Force, draw thousands of visitors annually. These magnificent machines stand as monuments to American industrial capacity and technological prowess, yet the full story of the B-29's impact includes not just the aircraft as designed, but how its crews adapted and improved it in combat. The variable trajectory release system represents one of the most significant of these field modifications, a testament to human ingenuity under the most challenging conditions imaginable. In the decades following World War II, precision became an increasingly central focus of American air power doctrine. From the development of guided bombs to today's GPS-directed munitions, the trend has consistently been toward weapons that can reliably hit specific targets while minimizing collateral damage. This evolution has transformed military aviation from the mass bombing campaigns of World War II to today's surgical strikes capable of disabling key facilities with minimal civilian casualties. The seeds of this transformation can be found in innovations like Sullivan's VTRS, early attempts to solve the fundamental challenge of putting bombs precisely where they were aimed. While the technology has advanced dramatically, the core principles remain consistent, gathering accurate data about conditions affecting the weapon's path, processing that data to determine the optimal release point, and continuously updating the calculation as conditions change. The story of the VTRS also illuminates the broader theme of how warfare drives technological innovation. Throughout history, military necessity has accelerated the development of technologies that later transform civilian life. From radar to jet engines to digital computers, many of the technologies we now take for granted received critical early funding and development through military applications before finding wider uses in peacetime. In the case of the VTRS, the principles of real-time data collection and adaptive response later influenced fields ranging from aerospace engineering to industrial automation. The mechanical computers that processed the wind data evolved into the electronic systems that now control everything from automobile engines to home thermostats. The concept of continuously measuring environmental conditions and adjusting mechanical responses accordingly has become fundamental to modern engineering practice. Perhaps most significantly, the VTRS story demonstrates how innovation often emerges from unexpected sources. The system wasn't developed by elite scientists in a government laboratory or by engineers at a major defense contractor. It came from frontline airmen who understood the problem intimately because they lived with its consequences on every mission. Their practical experience and diverse skills, aeronautical engineering, physics education, automotive mechanics, radio technology, combined to create a solution that formal research and development channels had missed. This pattern of bottom-up innovation has recurred throughout military history and continues today. During the Iraq and Afghanistan conflicts, for example, soldiers and Marines developed improvised armor for vehicles, modified communications equipment to work in challenging environments, and created new tactical approaches suited to counterinsurgency operations. Like Sullivan's crew, they were responding to immediate operational needs that formal acquisition and development processes were too slow to address. For military organizations, the challenge lies in balancing necessary standardization and discipline with the flexibility to embrace useful innovations from the field. General LeMay's decision to support rather than punish Sullivan's unauthorized modification exemplifies effective leadership in this context, recognizing the value of the innovation while ensuring it was properly tested and systematically implemented rather than remaining an isolated experiment. The full impact of the VTRS on the Pacific War remains difficult to quantify precisely. No single technology or tactic won the war. Victory came through the cumulative effect of many advantages, from industrial capacity to logistics to fighting spirit. Yet, in the specific context of the strategic bombing campaign against Japan, the ability to consistently destroy high-value targets with precision represented a significant force multiplier, allowing a relatively small number of aircraft to achieve disproportionate strategic effects. By August 1945, VTRS-equipped B-29s had destroyed or severely damaged 17 critical industrial facilities that had previously resisted conventional bombing efforts. These included aircraft engine factories, petroleum refineries, ammunition plants, and transportation hubs, all vital components of Japan's increasingly fragile war economy. While these precision strikes didn't replace the broader incendiary campaign, they complemented it by targeting specific bottlenecks in Japanese war production. Today, a replica of the original VTRS sits in a glass case at the National Museum of the United States Air Force in Dayton, Ohio. It's easy to miss among the more dramatic exhibits: the restored bombers, the massive weapons, the vivid dioramas of aerial combat. Yet this modest collection of gears, wires, and instruments represents one of the most consequential innovations to emerge from America's air campaign in the Pacific. The display includes a photograph of Sullivan's crew standing beside Carolina Queen, their faces reflecting the complex mixture of pride, exhaustion, and determination that characterized the bomber crews of World War II. The accompanying plaque describes the VTRS in technical terms but can't fully capture the human story behind it. The late-night conversations in which the idea first emerged, the painstaking work to build the prototype from salvaged parts, the tense moments as they tested the system in combat with their lives at stake. That human dimension remains the most compelling aspect of the VTRS story. Behind the technical innovation stood men who combined exceptional skills with moral purpose, seeking not just to survive their combat tour, but to make a meaningful difference in the war's outcome. Their story reminds us that even in the largest industrial war in history, individuals still mattered. Their decisions, their creativity, their courage often making the crucial difference between success and failure. As dawn broke over Tinian on August 15, 1945, Major William Sullivan and his crew were preparing for another mission when news of Japan's surrender announcement reached them. Standing beside their aircraft, the men who had flown 27 combat missions together experienced the sudden, disorienting reality that their war was over. They had survived when many others had not, their innovative spirit perhaps making the difference between life and death. In that moment of collective relief and exhaustion, Sullivan reportedly turned to Lieutenant Westfield and said simply, "It worked." Those two words encompassed not just their bombing system, but the entire massive effort to defeat Imperial Japan and restore peace to the Pacific. In the hangar's shadow, these airmen had helped change the course of the war through their ingenuity and persistence, a legacy that would influence aerial warfare for generations to come. As we reflect on this remarkable chapter in military history, we're reminded that innovation often emerges from unexpected sources. The next world-changing idea might come not from a prestigious laboratory or corporate research center, but from a small team confronting a seemingly insurmountable problem with nothing but their wits, determination, and a refusal to accept failure as the final answer. The B-29 Superfortress helped bring World War II to its conclusion, delivering both conventional and atomic weapons against Japan. But the full story of its effectiveness includes the contributions of crews like Sullivan's, who refused to accept the limitations of their equipment and instead found ways to transcend them. Their legacy lives on in modern precision warfare, where the ability to strike specific targets while minimizing collateral damage remains the ultimate objective. In the final analysis, the story of the Variable Trajectory Release System serves as a powerful reminder that war, for all its horror and destruction, sometimes accelerates human innovation in ways that transcend the conflict itself. The technologies and methods developed to improve bombing accuracy during World War II later found applications in fields ranging from commercial aviation to space exploration, their military origins often forgotten as they became integrated into civilian life. For Sullivan and his crew, the recognition of their contribution came too late for many of them to witness. By the time historians fully understood the significance of their innovation in the 1990s, several crew members had already passed away. Major William Sullivan died in 1989, never seeing the full declassification of the records that would confirm his place in military history. Lieutenant Thomas Westfield lived until 2003, long enough to see a small ceremony at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base acknowledging the VTRS as a precursor to modern precision bombing systems. As with many innovations born in wartime, the story of the VTRS is both inspiring and sobering. It represents human creativity and problem-solving at their finest, yet in service of a bombing campaign that caused tremendous suffering. This moral ambiguity should not be ignored, but neither should it prevent us from recognizing the technical achievement and its long-term implications for more humane conduct of warfare. The next time you see footage of a precision-guided munition striking exactly at its aim point, or read about surgical strikes that eliminate threats while sparing civilian infrastructure, remember that the lineage of such capabilities traces back not just to modern technology, but to the improvised innovation of a B-29 crew over the Pacific in 1945. Their story is a testament to the difference that individual initiative can make, even amid the largest military conflict in human history. In an age of increasingly automated warfare, the human element remains irreplaceable. The ability to identify problems, imagine solutions, and implement them under adverse conditions, these qualities made Sullivan's innovation possible and continue to shape military effectiveness today. His legacy reminds us that behind every technological system stand the people who conceive, create, and employ it.